Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here on this very hot day. We're expecting people to kind of trickle in throughout the day, finding parking and so forth. My name is Ann Huang. I'm the Executive Director of World Arts West. My pronouns are she, her. Before we begin our program today, I want to acknowledge that today's program is happening on the unceded and traditional land of the Ramaytush Ohlone. And for all the cultural communities around the world that are fighting for the rightful sovereignty of their homelands, we hear you, we see you, we are in solidarity with you. World Arts West is a 46-year-old arts organization that serves the largest world dance network in the United States. What do? We provide capacity building, artist services, and live performance opportunities, visibility, and access. To find out more about our programs, please go to our info desk outside and sign up on our mailing list. In the last 5 years, World Arts West has undergone a deeply transformative equity journey. For the first time, World Arts West board, staff, festival production team are majority cultural artists that reflects the diversity of the artist community that we serve. We also did, thank you. We also did quite a bit of deep listening in our community. Out of that deep listening, we're rolling out festival programs with themes that are timely and relevant. This year, Dance as Activism. Next year, Dance, Health, and Healing. Again, keep us, stay on our mailing list to be informed. Why are we doing Dance as Activism this year? This year's theme shares the power of cultural dance to challenge societal norms, preserve cultural heritage, and inspire social change. This year, close to 200 cultural artists are participating in performances, dance workshops, and artist dialogues. Every single one of those artists is deeply engaged in social justice work. For the first time in our organization, we're presenting this program. We're very, very proud of it. Yes. This 3-weekend festival, Artist Dialogue, Weekend 1, opens today. The Artist Dialogue series centers on these 4 topics. Today, queer identity in cultural dance. Later this afternoon, dance as a form of resistance. Next Sunday at Dance Mission, female empowerment and evolution of traditional dance in contemporary times. Now, I would like to introduce our wonderful moderator, Akhil Joondeph. Akhil has 17 years of dance experience, including 12 years of intensive training in ODC. He has also studied jazz, modern, contemporary, hip-hop, improvisation, Ghanaian dance, Bharatanatyam, and more. His work lies at the intersection of these various disciplines, as well as the intersections of his cultural identities as a queer, multi-ethnic, second-generation South Asian American dancer from California. In his work, he draws from both South Asian dance forms and global dance practices, blurring the boundaries of genre while using the body as a storytelling instrument, capable of interrogating and questioning societal institutions, cultural constructs, and the self. Lastly, Akhil has been a longtime member of the World Arts West community, performed in our festival many times, and I think has been coming to our annual festival since you were 4 years old. All right, take it away, Akhil. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Anne. And thank you all for joining us. Really, really excited to be, very excited to be having this conversation with all of us today. Before we get started, I want to introduce all of the lovely artists that we have on our panel. I'm just gonna take this off. Thank you so much. Okay, this is a little better. Great. First, we have Snowflake, Arizmendi-Calvert. Snowflake is a Yaqui and Tzotzil two-spirit artist, dancer, drag performer, event host, entrepreneur, and filmmaker. Her artistry is a platform for activism, notably within the LGBTQ+ community. She nurtured talent as owner of the Dance Zone Studio, co-produces Seeds and Sequins, collaborates with the Try Project, and serves on the boards of SADC and the Stance on Dance magazine. Her filmmaking includes Chalk and Yum, and she is working on the dance project Neanderthal Land Acknowledgement. Next, we have Amit Patel. Amit is a dancer, choreographer, teacher, and artistic director living in the San Francisco Bay Area. He is the co-founder of Ishami Dance Company, a South Asian contemporary dance company. As a first-generation born Indian American, Amit strives to fuse his Eastern culture with his Western training to expand an idiom of Indian contemporary dance. Amit is equally notable for his rebellious pieces in heels, yes, yep, which challenge the norms of sexual identity in dance. He has toured all over the world, teaching classes and creating safe spaces for the LGBTQ+ community. And last but not least, we have Arturo Magaña. Arturo started his dance training at the age of 10 at the Casa de la Cultura of Jerez, Zacatecas, Mexico. After migrating to California, he joined Folklorico Pro Latino, the first gay Mexican folklorico project in the United States. It was in Folklorico Pro Latino that Arturo discovered his calling for social justice. For more than a decade, starting in 2003, he was part of Los Lupeños de San Jose, working directly with its co-founder, Dr. Susan Cachon. He was artistic director for 1 year and general director of the Lupeños Academy for 5 years, and completed an artistic residency at the University of Colima under the direct mentorship of Maestro Rafael Zamaripa. In November of 2015, Arturo founded Ensemble Folklorico Colibri, which in 2020 was the first ever LGBTQ Folklorico Academy. Amazing. So we have a very, very highly skilled and experienced panel with us today. Today's panel will dive into how these artists leverage queerness and how queerness appears in their work, how they're creating safe spaces for the LGBTQ+ community, how their work straddles the lines between culture, modernity, tradition, and queer expression. So looking forward to learning so much from all of you. Let's just jump right into it. So first, how has queerness existed within your cultural background, especially in the context of dance? How has queerness also been marginalized historically in your culture, especially within the context of dance? How have colonialism and other imposing value systems impacted expressions of queerness and dance? I know that's a lot. Let's maybe start off with you, Snowflake.
Yeah, okay. Well, I feel like each one of those things is like a full workshop to explain all of it. So my background, a little more that was mentioned, is from my dad is from Simojovel, Chiapas. My people are Tzotzil. And then from my mom, I'm Yoeme. I'm enrolled in the Yaquis of Southern California. And so if you don't know where Yaquis are from, we're split by the U.S.-Mexican border from Sonora, Mexico, all the way into southern Arizona. But then we have a band in Texas and then a large Yaqui population here in California. So yeah, from my dad's side, we encountered the Spanish in the year 1512, and my mom's side for Yoeme, the year 1618. So since then, we've been battling colonialism and resisting white supremacy. Yaquis are the only tribe to never be, or one of the only tribes to never be defeated by U.S., Mexican, and Spanish governments. So we're still fighting. So with that context, so historically in both of my peoples, queerness and transness, or at least how we perceive it today in our social constructs, existed since time immemorial, and they were a huge part of our cultures. But then with forced Christianization, a lot of that, I wouldn't say is lost, because in every generation we're still existing, and there's people pushing back and creating those spaces. But definitely, long story short, for Yaqui, one of the first things that the Jesuit priests wrote about in 1618 was that we had the highest concentration of homosexuals and cross-dressers in the whole continent. So that tells me that I'm right on track with my ancestors. But what that also did was, because of homophobia and transphobia that was imposed on my peoples, a lot of those societal positions, right, and societal roles that we had aren't necessarily there. So in my generation and previous generations is, one, just trying to carve out space for ourselves, but it's not really like reinventing the wheel. It's kind of figuring out, okay, what did they have, hundreds of years ago that we can still have today, and then what can we contribute to that story so that future generations don't have to deal with this. So yeah, and as someone who started off in classical ballet, I was a principal for years and years, and segued into modern contemporary, now queer performance art, whatever that is. Gets me the grants, is making sure that I'm still in alignment with all of my peoples and all of the cultures that I'm carrying. So yeah, the fight is really just making sure that I get to be myself in all of these spaces that historically, over the last 500 years, have pushed me out, generally speaking.
Thank you, that was beautiful. I guess similarly, I feel like you can have a workshop for every one of these questions for sure. For me, my name is Amit. I am Indian American. My parents are from Gujarat, and then I am first generation born in California. A few things, I guess, historically, I feel like there is a very rich history of queerness and queer identity in the Indian subcontinent as a whole, whether or not you're looking into things like just like the Hijra community, the wife culture. There's so many very unique historical context of queer people existing. However, post-colonialism and during colonialism, I feel like there was a lot of erasure of a lot of these identities. And then in a post-colonial world as well, there was a conservative kind of approach to often erase a lot of these identities as well, especially within the arts as well, whether it became for the elite or upper caste or other forms of of those kinds of folks in society. And I feel like a lot of queer folks ended up going through the margins, or just weren't getting as much equal opportunity, access, and exposure to exist. And but that all being said, how it relates back to the art, there is a rich history, but I feel like for me and my exposure initially was, I didn't really know a single queer brown person growing up in the Bay who was pursuing the arts. And I think for me, it took a lot of unlearning of habits, and then relearning a lot of history from people that I had to dig a lot to find, oh, okay, this shit actually did exist before. I just had no idea about it. A lot of the communities that I grew up around were very conservative, and a lot of the times my parents' generation and all of them who kind of immigrated from India here, they often kept a lot of the more conservative values of what India may have been in the 70s, 60s, 80s, and that didn't really change as much in the US. So oftentimes our families here are a little bit more conservative than the ones that I have back home or back in India, because they've changed with times a lot of times, but a lot of the folks here have not. And so it's interesting. I feel like I'm still constantly rediscovering new interesting things about history of queerness and identity in dance, and how a lot of queer folks in the past have led to so much dance innovation, and how and how I'm just kind of carrying on that in a different way, in a completely independent situation. So I'm just still unpacking, still unlearning, but I feel like I'm happy. I'm getting them.
Hi, my name is Arturo, as he already said. I share a lot of what you said, Snowflake, in my background. I feel that in my native people, queerness, trans was always existent and was revered, in fact. We were looked at spiritual people as spiritual people, people that would take care of our elders, people that would be the artist, the spiritual guidance. And with the colonization, as all of you guys have mentioned, and with the influence, heavy influence of the religion, our personalities ourselves got repressed. Specifically in the world of Mexican folklorico, I feel that queerness has always been there. Perhaps, without insult to my fellow dancers, perhaps I would say almost 80% of the male dancers are queer, but it's almost like the don't ask, don't tell, right? We are asked to represent beautiful love stories, very heteronormative. Most of the dances of Mexico are dances of courtship, and so the male would go after the lady, or the women would be in a very passive role, the mother, the person who washes the dishes, and the male would be the opposite. We would be represented with like very strong stand, the drunk person, the father. And I feel that with that repression, our queerness has been pushed down. Now, within my group, we started Folklorico Colibri. We sort of broke the norms, and we started by pushing the agenda of we're going to wear skirts because it's just a prop, right? And we do it to make a point of feminism within the folklore, because it has always existed. We are now putting stories of a gay wedding, lesbian proposal, because those stories are true stories that are happening. And if we are being asked to portray the father in a regular, I don't want to say regular, in a heterosexual wedding, why not put a queer wedding in it? So little by little, as you said as well, we're sort of deconstructing the norms and building little by little the acceptance of identifying ourselves as we are. I don't have to dress in drag in order to put on a skirt or represent a woman. I put on makeup and I love it. I put on my beautiful earrings and I love it because that's exactly what I feel and what I feel that represents my true self.
So I think what is very clear from all of what you've shared is that queerness has existed historically everywhere. This is not something that's new, it's something that is historic and ancient. And so going off of that, how do you each leverage, as artists, how do you leverage the traditional aesthetics of queerness or just traditional aesthetics of your cultural background in your work that is also profoundly queer at the same time? Snowflake, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, for me and my career, I started off in, like I said, classical ballet, and as a principal, you're getting roles that are, at least for me, it was like always misgendering, right? And like having to always play the prince and do these things, which was fun because I got to have that experience as a ballet dancer and loved it, but then also hated it at the same time, which is why I stopped. Because it was like killing my soul, basically. And also, classical ballet is very European-centric, which is also not representative of my full body and who I am. And so I feel like in my work, especially in the last 14 years in my career, was how do I not... I wouldn't use the term leveraging my culture. Like I wouldn't say it that way. It's more of like, how can I not let my soul be like eaten at, right, and sucked away by these like Eurocentric normativity within the dance world. And part of it is also recognizing, my family's from Chiapas, and it's very rural and very indigenous, and very few people ever leave Chiapas, even just for vacation, let alone live in the U.S. Like I have. So understanding that I'm not an official representative of everyone in Chiapas, but understanding that as a Chiapaneca, in these spaces, getting able to speak on these panels, traveling around the world, and knowing that I'm having the blessing of my people and my family. I want to be true to myself, and I want to be true to my people. And the same goes for my mom's side. Is like, I also recognize there's only like very few Yoeme, very few Yaquis in the contemporary dance world. And so recognizing that fact of like, I'm not just doing it for me, I'm doing it for a whole tribe of people, and not just for the people alive, but for my ancestors who fought just so that I can be alive. And then thinking about future generations, because I can only think of two other Yaqui dancers, Jose Limon and then Sam Eros Mitchell, who's from the Texas Band of Yaquis. And for the younger kids growing up, and for future generations who aren't even born yet, like I just want to leave a paper trail, right? And do the best that I can so that they can learn from my mistakes and successes, so they have something to build off of, because there's not very many of my people in these spaces. And recognizing that of like, I want to be a good Yaqui, I want to be a good Chepaneca, in life, and no matter what I do, whether it's dance or I'm cooking at home, like it's gonna bleed through. And so like, again, it's not that I'm leveraging, it's more me of like being brave enough to exist in these spaces that historically have not given me or my people these spaces.
Beautiful. I guess for me, growing up in the Bay, I think similarly with, there wasn't a lot of queer, explicit queer expression within the environment that I grew up. I grew up did a lot of traditional folk dance. I did garba ras. I did a lot of Bollywood, and then eventually in high school and around that time I started going into contemporary ballet, the whole Western side of everything. And I think for me, one of the big realizations was similarly all the roles that I was playing when I was doing a lot more traditional Bollywood were extremely heteronormative. I would always be, the masculine man chasing the girls' hips and running after them, lifting them, doing all these things. And I'm like, it was amazing. I learned so much from flexing those muscles too. But then at the same time, I remember always feeling that, I kind of feel like this just isn't, one, it's not very exciting for me, but then two, I just felt like this doesn't really represent me. I love moving, but this doesn't feel right within my own body, and how can I combat that? I remember the very first time I even started growing out my hair, I was in high school, and I remember the group I was with also at the time were like, you have to cut your hair, otherwise you'll kind of and it became a huge issue every show, so I had to constantly keep cutting my hair, and then eventually I was like, I'm leaving. I'm gonna keep my hair open, amongst a myriad of other things. But I think for me, the big thing was okay, if I feel this is natural to me, why should I be fighting it? And I think it started with some of those initial thoughts, because at the time, I didn't have the education or the awareness of how to label all these things. I didn't know what queer was or meant. I didn't necessarily know all the other I didn't know what code switching was. I didn't know what all these other, things that now I have some awareness for. And I think with my own experience, I kind of used a lot of that and kind of just blindly walked through the earth. And I was like, okay, I quit my company. I'm going to start my own stuff. I started exploring doing more Indian contemporary work, which was just fusing all my different dance backgrounds together and seeing how can I create stories that exist for me in parallel with just fusing different dance disciplines. And then from there, I started exploring something that I started called Bollywood Heels, which was, at the time, I was like, hey, I love taking heels classes. I was doing a lot of jazz at the time too. And unfortunately, I just didn't relate to a lot of the music that I was dancing to, so why don't just try it to South Asian music? And I didn't realize at the time that that was kind of, outing myself in a very public way of like having a flyer and being like, well, I'm just exploring, and then I realized that, okay, I very much outed myself also, but at the same time, there's no going back also, but I think for me, it was very much that, okay, now my goal was I wanted to explore what it meant to dance in a more what you would call traditionally feminine way, or just moving sensually, because that wasn't something that I had experienced, and I think that was something that I wanted to allow myself permission to. And then by teaching, the goal was very much, okay, how can I create some space for not just queer folks, but also a lot of the times heterosexual women were kind of like ridiculed a little bit, or like kind of given a lot of crap for dancing too sexy, right? And how can you create spaces where you're allowed to express your full range of sensuality, no matter who you are, and if you want to make it a little bit more stronger or more softer, all those spaces can very much exist at the same time, and it's individual per body versus it being, we all have to look like one another. And I think that's where a lot of it started for me. And then I think where it ended now is very much like, now I have a dance company with my co-founder Ishika, and you're also part of that as well, Akhil. And I think one of the main things for me is with our work is very much how can it very much exist in normalcy versus it being always a form of like, if you're doing a piece about two queer people having love, that's like always a statement. And yes, in many ways that is a statement also, but in many ways that's also just extremely normal for us, right? And I think that's also trying to find new ways to like share that as well. And I think I'm still very much in the heart of it, and I feel like I'm just breaking the surface of that too.
Beautiful. It's so nice to hear the similarities that we all share. Like them, me dancing for over 15 years as a general traditional dancer. It came to the point in where I was representing Mexico, I was representing my culture, but I was drowning myself in that. I was not representing who I was. And I remember one time I asked Dr. Kashin, we got invited to this queer event. Can I use the material from Los Lupeños to perform? And she said, absolutely. She was my mentor, rest in peace. But the artistic director at that point said, you're not gonna make ridicule of folklorico. You cannot use costumes, you cannot use our material, you cannot do any of that. And it was like somebody turned the lights off. And at the same time, somebody like stabbed me with something really hot in my heart that said, no, you need to do this. I went back to Dr. Kashin and I said, I'm leaving. Because if I'm not accepted as who I am, then I don't belong here. I've given the company so much of my time, so much of my effort, and I loved every single moment of it. Susie went back to the director and said, how dare you? If you look at your dancers, the majority of them are queer. And if you're putting something in their face, like you're covering their existence, that's not who we are. I was able to do the piece, I was able to use the costumes, and it was amazing. But to answer your question, it is very important for us in Colibri to also be very respectful of the tradition, right? And sort of make it flexible and bend the rules and put in our personalities, put in our existence. But at the same time, we are folklorico dancers. So when we are on stage, I want to make sure that my dancers are doing the footwork correctly. I want to make sure that if we are wearing skirts, we're not insulting the women that wear the skirts. We're going to wear skirts and we're going to do amazing faldeo. And those faldas, those skirts are like 15 pounds each. So once we started using them, we even have more respect for the female dancers. We want to make sure that when the audience sees our work, they see a piece of art. They don't just see the cliche gay person wearing a skirt and having fun. Because it is really fun, but we're making a point. So that's how we bring and curate queerness in our company. We're very lucky to have heterosexual people in our group. At first, it was only LGBTQ, but a lot of people started liking our work, and they started joining our group. And some of us, well, not me, but some people were not comfortable with that. But I thought, if we have been repressed before, why are we becoming the people who repress other people? If people want to come and dance and accept our work and respect who we are and are willing to do the piece as I create the piece, by all means. So we added the plus to our LGBTQ, and it's been amazing. It's just been a blessing. And again, the most important thing for us is to educate, to do our work with love and respect, and to make sure that when people see us, they see a beautiful piece of art that they can connect with.
Beautiful, everyone. And yes, I think, Arturo, you put it perfectly that there are so many commonalities between all of our backgrounds as queer artists who also have existed within these very heteronormative spaces and grown up in spaces like that. I know I have also in the Indian classical world encountered a lot of that as well myself. And so it's really inspiring to just see all of you taking those leaps and being willing to embrace both the traditional aesthetics and yourselves fully. Somewhat along those lines, how do you in your work break with tradition intentionally to create space for queerness? And I know some of us have already touched on this, but how do you approach the act of evolution and of change and of breaking with some of these traditional ideas or constructs, or traditional maybe in quotes, because a lot of what we consider traditional are colonial imports or prejudices that came later on in history. But I guess, how do you approach that? Maybe, Amit, we can start with you on this one.
Sure. I guess it also always changes. For me, sometimes it can be something as simple as costuming and attire, and it doesn't. The story or the work itself doesn't, or the movement doesn't necessarily have to always be queer-based. Sometimes it's something as simple as costuming and how you dress everybody. That's one element. Sometimes it's very much, okay, if we're trying to push a very specific narrative, right, that's one way to go about it. And I think, so I feel like it kind of varies from piece to piece or from vision to vision. But I think one piece that we did recently, which was called Mehfil for our show Pitch On, and also you and I did a duet for that same show. But that one piece that we did was like a heels piece in which we kind of it was a mehfil means gathering, and it was traditionally usually done with mostly Kathak dancers and in various settings, but I think the idea was, you're welcoming a crowd, you're welcoming people, and then you're kind of having a showing of performance, a showing of singing and music and dance. And I think for us, our interpretation was doing some sort of similar music and wearing heels, having some very fusion vibes across the board. And I think it was still very much the essence of a gathering, but we were just changing up little things here and there, whether it's playing with our footwear, whether it's playing, which you would normally wear ghungroos, but we were having heels, how we dressed, all of that. Another way is, we had this one piece that was just all the dancers had both, in Gujarat, when you do Garba, you totally have a kedia, which is like a skirt that's for the top half, and then usually the men would wear that, and the girls would wear the skirt on the bottom half, and we ended up having everyone wear both, and the idea was just to allow for all of it to kind of just exist, and everyone just exist in their own way, and that was a fun costume approach. Our duet that we did was very much about, imagine a world in which this kind of queer love was just so normal that it's part of every day, and what does that look like, right? And I think that is kind of where currently the work that we're exploring. I think in classes, that's been one of the biggest ways I've been really pushing for people to allow that same expression being much more inclusive, right? As you're saying, it's not necessarily only meant for queer people to be, you know, open and free. I feel like it's very much collective, you know, like liberation, in the sense that I feel like a lot of my like friends who are heterosexual, when they come to class, they're expressing themselves in unique ways that they didn't know, and it's very much just movement and good feelings versus it being like, okay, well, I can't dance this way, I'm not queer, right? And I'm like, I think that's something that we're kind of also being like, oh, this is not a us only situation. It's very much, hey, like a lot of the things we're learning and we're deconstructing is also, I would say, for the collective good of everyone, kind of like taking off all these labels of this is how you're supposed to move or dance or like conduct yourselves. And yeah, I don't know if that answers your question. I think I went on a detour, but yeah, somewhere there.
That was a very beautiful detour. And I think you got to this, and both of you got to this in your answers to the previous questions as well. And that's the need for safe spaces for queer people in the dance world, because not only is queer dance itself important, but space, whether the work itself is explicitly queer or not, safe spaces for queer people to be unapologetically themselves in a dance setting are, as we heard, very rare, and also very, very special. And I know all of you are very intentionally building those spaces. So could you each talk a little bit about that? Maybe we can start with Arturo on this one.
Sure. What I'm doing, and now that Colibri has matured, we're about to be 10 years next year, our big anniversary. So save the date, August. Well, I don't have the date yet, but we'll have our big show. Adding, and a little bit going back to the previous question, and fusing it with this, it's important for us to add our stories. And I was telling you guys about, earlier we were having a conversation, bringing stories that are current stories and that are accurate stories in our community is very important. We are now feeling comfortable putting stories that are not always a happy ending, because those are true stories. In fact, we're curating a piece that is for the trans community and to depict the violence that happens in the trans community. And it doesn't have a very happy ending, but our goal is so that when the audience sees that piece, they get moved. Either they get angry, they get sad, they get shocked, because that's what art should do. Creating the spaces, I would say, is also when we perform, we like to engage with the audience, and we always do an audience participation, and we always bring a ton of skirts for kids, for adults, and we bring them to the stage and we put on skirts on them. And just by that mere fact of feeling part of that community, people really get excited and they really like it. They feel part of our community. We have our academy, which is for toddlers to adults. We have a Mommy and Me class, which is so adorable. And obviously, we don't know what kid is queer or not, or we don't even ask if the parents are queer or not. But they know when they go to our studio, our big old rainbow is there. It says LGBTQ Dance Company. And people don't ask. People appreciate the work that we give, quality work, make sure that everyone is happy, that they feel content when they're there. In all of our classes, when we are going to wear the skirt, we always ask the boys and the girls, it's time to put on our skirts. Whomever is going to be a skirt goes in the side. Whomever is going to be a boot, we don't call ourselves men or women. Boots are the male representing dancer. Skirts are the female representing dancer. And then there's people in between that want to wear the skirt for a little bit and they get tired, they take it off. But that is really important. And we actually have I want to say he's 5, that he asked his mom to have a skirt made for him. And he is so adorable. He steals my heart every time he's in class. And as soon as we're going to use props and we're gonna put the skirt, or we're gonna use the props for the male representing, he goes directly for his skirt, and he's the first one in line. And his mom at first was nervous to ask us. She's like, Maestro, I have a question, but I'm really embarrassed, and I don't want to insult you. And I said, what is it? And she said, my son really wants to wear a skirt. I almost went in tears, and I said, are you kidding me? That is, that is like music to my ears. That is amazing, and it is so beautiful that she's allowing him to express himself, whether he's going to be queer or not. There's no need to put a label in this beautiful art. You can represent yourself as you exactly feel and create and represent.
Yeah, wow, that's beautiful. Yeah, so for me, I'm I'm on the steering committee that produces the Queering Dance Festival. And so our work there is to form by LGBTQ plus people. Most of the work that I do is just for queer people and also Indigenous as well. But yeah, I really don't contribute to straight world or organizations unless it's somehow going to benefit queer people or Indigenous people. It's just where I'm at. So, I mean, thank you for the allies, but but at Queering Dance Festival, it's actually really great that we're able to provide that space because, our artists aren't obligated to create a queer performance, whatever that is. They can just create as queer people, and whatever comes up is, what comes up. And so that's really fun. And we do things all throughout the year, not just in our frolic performances, but something that we just started this year, that it's going to be an annual thing. So it'll kick off, I believe, in March. Dates are TBD. But it's called Queering Cultural Forms. So it's very similar to this panel. And so we have a panel discussion from people representing different cultures and their own cultures and through their traditional dance. And so we're kind of starting those conversations for people on what does it mean to queer your cultural form? What does it mean to be a queer person or a trans person in these cultural forms? But then not only do we talk about it, but then there's workshops associated with each one of those panelists. So, this past year we had Vera Hanoush do queering Armenian dance. We had, Sanjeev do queering Bhangra. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. Okay, cool. I was corrected a lot, so I'm trying to get it right. So it's we have these different spaces, and for me going this year of being able to participate in a lot of them was seeing the need, the community need, not just for in the contemporary world to have queer spaces, but also within these traditional dance forms, right? We had Rogelio doing Queering Folklorico, and as, a Mexican, I've never felt any sort of connection to folklorico because of the transphobia and homophobia and always wanting to wear a dress and never knowing that I could actually, right? And taking that was so healing because it was oh, I can get behind this revolution of we deserve this space too, right? And so many cultures realizing in their own way also deserve that. And providing space for, Nigerians and West African people to also have those conversations about what does it mean to be queer Nigerian or queer and someone in the African diaspora, and what does that mean in your traditional dance form? Because very similarly in their indigeneity, they also have gods and goddesses, and deep within their ancestral culture, queerness and transness has always existed as well. And so how do we provide space not just for me being Chepaneka and Yaqui, but how do I do it for all these other cultures that also need it? So it's a fun place to be in the Queering Dance Festival, creating these spaces, because there's a lot of companies and spaces that are run by queer people, but it's not necessarily queerness and transness is centered, and it's a privilege to be able to provide space for people.
No, I was gonna say, Akhil, I feel like you also have a very interesting perspective, like speaking on like the South Asian classical forms and queering that. I feel like it would be interesting to hear your perspective of how a lot of the South Asian like classical forms, they have some roots of sensuality and queerness as well, but a lot of times that's been also erased. And I feel like within your practice as well, I feel like that's something you're also developing a lot more now. I feel like it would be curious to hear.
Sure, yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. As Anne mentioned when she was introducing me, a lot of my background is in Odissi, which is one of the classicized classical forms of Indian dance. And historically, Indian classical dance, again, before Indian independence, there was no classical dance. There was just dance. When dance became classicized, it became codified and associated with this idea of India, of the new nation, of the nationalism, of Hinduism as a religion, which was also being defined in the terms of the nation. All of this was sort of coming about around the same time. And I could talk about all this history forever, but I'm not going to do that because we have limited time today. But basically, historically, there was a lot of sensuality in these dance forms. If you go to India and you see any temple, on the walls of the temple, there's people having sex. Like, sensuality was celebrated, was visible, was out there, and it was in the arts historically. And that's something that when these forms were codified and classicized, they were also, quote unquote, sanitized. I call that made boring, but they were sanitized, and a lot of the eroticism and the sensuality and the romance and these very sensual topics and feelings and songs were removed from these dance forms. And the aesthetics that come with them, of the sensuality, of the hip movements, of the languorous torso movements, have been restricted. The hips have been restricted. All of these things, both in terms of aesthetics and themes, and something that I've been really interested in lately, as Amit mentions, is sort of bridging those divides. Because I think, as someone who learned classical dance for such a long time, I was taught that sensuality and classicism were these two very diametrically opposed spheres. But historically, that's been anything but the case. And in fact, sensuality has inhabited these dance forms and the bodies of Indian dancers for millennia, at least from what we can tell. And so how can we return that back to these forms, but in ways that are queer, in ways that are expansive, and in ways that feel right? And so I feel like a lot of, where I'm at with my practice and my work now is sort of finding ways to do that. And it's certainly reverential for tradition, and it's also very anti-tradition in some ways, because what is being heralded as quote unquote tradition is actually not our tradition. And what most of the really big traditional practitioners think is their tradition is historically maybe not what we've been practicing. And so I think it's a extremely traditional and also very anti-traditional at the same time. But with that, I want to create the space similar to Amit with your classes, create spaces where people who have that training and who enjoy that aesthetic of classical dance can also feel empowered in their sensuality and feel empowered to express themselves in sensual ways, whether that's masculine, whether that's feminine, however that might show up in their bodies. Because I think sensuality is something that has been policed so much and continues to be policed so much within the classical space, where you're always told oh, you cannot be too vulgar, you can't be crass, that dancer did a crazy padam, that was so vulgar, take them off the stage. Things like that are so commonplace. And so how can we allow just sensuality to exist authentically, and coexist with the aesthetics that it has coexisted with historically? So I guess that sort of answers your question of me. At this point, we could talk about these things forever, but I wanted to open it up to all of you, amazing audience who've been listening so attentively. If you had any questions for our amazing panelists, we have a few minutes left, so I would welcome any questions, curiosities that any of you might have.
Political nature of your dance and your work. In particular, I come from the classical Indian background, and so acknowledging that we have many privileges associated with this classical tradition, and also those are weaponized by the political sphere. So I'm really curious on all of your thoughts.
For us, Mexico is very machista, very male-oriented country, and it has been difficult to put our stamp and be able to perform freely and feel comfortable. The first time we performed, we were doing a solo, and we were gonna hold hands, and I didn't even want to touch my partner dancer because I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. What if we get like a rock thrown at us or something? And we were performing at the Mexican Heritage Plaza just for the general public. And we started dancing and we were really nervous. And then all of a sudden we hear, yay, and they're clapping. And we like looked and it was the kids that were in the front watching. And at that moment, I felt like an awakening, like your fears are you. It's not them. They're getting what you are sort of feeding them. But if we are comfortable, we're gonna be okay. Like I said before, the only tool or weapon to be against homophobia and transphobia and repression from a heteronormative political sphere is just to continue the fight and do it with respect and educate. To educate the people is the most important thing we can do. If they are, most of the time is fear that of something that they don't understand that pushes them away from us. So yeah, it is a tall order, but we have to fight.
Oh, it works now? Okay. I think similarly on the sense of like educating, I think that's one of the biggest things of how can you, like when I remember when I first started doing things as well, I was, naive enough to start posting everything on YouTube because I was like, okay, I'm starting everything. I should just post everything everywhere, have an online journal of my work. And I remember the first couple of things that started getting traction, there was so much hate comments all over. And I was like, oh my God, the world is like ending right now. Like there's so many people who are like hating this, but there is so much more love on that. And I thought that was such an interesting realization where I'm like, okay, you'll have like 50 amazing comments and then you'll have like 10 or so comments that are like, you're like, you're like tainting our culture or doing all these X, Y, and Z things, and it gets worse and stuff like that as well. But I think for me, on the online spaces, I feel like, yes, there's no point really debating online with anonymous keyboard folks. But at the same time, when the trick for me, or the realization was, it all starts within our own like communities also. And I think and it makes so many more waves from there. And I think when I first started performing a lot more queer-based or like pushing like a barrier here and there, whether it was, hey, for this show, we're all gonna have a slightly more traditionally feminine color, to we're all going to wear skirts, we're all going to wear the heels, and I feel like a lot of my audiences like throughout the years kind of evolved with me, and I thought that was something that was very powerful versus it just being like well, hey, we're here and we're gonna thing, and I think that's also equally important also. But I think some folks receive and change in so many different ways, whether it's like socially, economically, politically, all these things kind of need to happen at the same time in different ways. And within, I guess, my community, I feel like I know a lot of people who wouldn't receive something so outright that well, and I feel like that meant for me, I'm like, okay, in order for you to hear what we're saying is not so radical, you need to kind of like be eased into something in some way. And I thought that was one way to start, and I feel like now it's getting better. I was so surprised, like a random tangent here, but in 2020, right before COVID, I did a teaching tour in India for about almost 2 months, and I was teaching heels in India, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go, like, I think something's gonna happen to me in some cities, and like my parents were like, you shouldn't go, you should, because they're anyways not a big fan of me teaching in heels at that time, but I was like, I think I'm gonna go. I think India has to have so many queer people, but just by population size, right? They have to be there, and so I was lucky that I had like enough of a social media following and all that stuff by that time. And so when I taught, I had like like a lot of queer folks in every city, but aside from just the queer folk that attended class, I went to like, you know, a food vendor in my heels, and I was like, you know, well, I'm still just gonna exist as I would, given that I had the privilege of being from America in India, and that's a very real thing too. But I was very surprised by the fact that I was met with so much more love than hate, and I thought that was really surprising, and I thought that was something I feel like, okay, people are making that assumption. People are generally good. You just have to like warm up to them a little bit more. I feel like that's been a very helpful approach in how I like deal with students or parents of kids, or even people who are a lot more hesitant as a whole. And I think, yeah, it's been interesting. I feel like it's always ongoing. I feel like you'll always meet like one or two like people who are very like, I don't like what I just watched, like in the audience sometimes. And then at the same time, like sometimes they might forget by the end of the show. And I feel like that's kind of the beauty of what we all do, is like, you know, you can maybe create that opening of like empathy or connection. And I think, yeah, it's a beautiful process.
Yeah, sure. I'll add a little. Yeah, no, I mean, just kind of going off of that as well is like, I don't know, for me as an artist, like if someone comes in and sees my work and then they hate it so much that they get up and leave, to me that's successful because I made them feel something, right? I've gotten the standing ovations before, and that's beautiful, but it's like, I like it when people feel things and think about things and like need to have a conversation later, because then that to me is like more art than like clapping and then they leave and forget about whatever they saw, right? But I think also too, I'm a little different and really privileged in this way, is that I can, usually any cultural stuff that I do in my work, I get permission, either from my family or from my tribe. And, you know, I'm accountable to my parents, my family, and then my elders, and not just people that are older than me, but people that are appointed elders in my tribe, that I'm accountable to. And so if I do something that's weird or off, they'll come tell me and like correct me in a good way, but like, you know, it's helpful. And so, so if something does cause a stir, I kind of have this family and tribal backing, to where it's like, yeah, you can hate me, but who cares, you know? Like, I did things in a good way. And again, going back to, like, I create things for queer and trans people, so anyone outside of that, I really don't care. You know, and if you feel something, you feel something, but, like, I'm not here to change you. I'm here to build up the community that I'm a part of. Makes sense.
I guess I can add a little bit to this. I think my perspective might be a little bit different, because I think the Indian classical world that I came from, at least the one that I was in, was so anti-queer in so many ways, and I know so many of them don't like my work. And I know that that's just like something I'm living with, and will probably continue to live with. I mean, I remember even like people my age, I remember the first time I used Bharatanatyam footwork and did that with shoes on. I remember like someone who was literally like my age came up to me and like, oh my God, Akhil, what are you doing? You're like disrespecting our Earth Mother, you're killing our gods, like all of this stuff. And I was like, okay, like, whoa, that's a lot. Like let's talk about this. And I think, this is like scattered thoughts. I think similar to what a lot of you have mentioned, that's important too. And I think it's not that I try to be provocative, but I think in creating things that feel authentic to me, and feel authentic for me to create queer spaces and expansive spaces, there are things that are going to be provocative and controversial to a lot of people. It's not like I'm chasing controversy, but I'm also not, I don't think, running away from it. And like you said, that's really important. That means they're feeling something, and that means that their minds are being opened maybe a little bit, or at least they're thinking about what it means to do Bharatanatyam in shoes, or to wear heels and kunguru at the same time, or to like use Odissi jewelry and do voguing. Like, what does that even mean? Like, people might rush to anger, but at least they're thinking about what happens when these worlds coexist. And so I think I'm also at a place where, like, because you mentioned Indian classical dance and the privileges that come with, I think, being an Indian classical dance practitioner. And I've pretty much, I would say, renounced that world entirely, and knowing I have to renounce that world in order to be queer, and that, at least at the moment. And it sucks, but also I'm making work for me, and I want to make stuff that makes me feel authentically myself, and I want to make things that feel real to me. And if that means giving up a lot of the power and the privilege within the South Asian space that comes with being a classical dancer and having a good relationship with my teacher and having an actual place in the Indian classical dance community, if I have to give that all up, which I kind of have, to make things that feel right, I think I'm at least willing to do that at the moment, and I don't think there's any going back now, unfortunately, so I'll have to be willing to do that forever. But yeah, I think these things are very politically charged, even if they aren't personally. Like for me, maybe it's just me expressing myself, but to a lot of other people, because of how queerness has been politicized, it's considered sacrilege and it's considered anti-culture and anti-tradition. But I also think for me and for a lot of us, that's worth it when we create spaces for us and for our communities to be authentic. I think we have time for another question, if anyone else. Yeah.
I think mentorship is crucial. I am indebted to my mentor, Dr. Susan Cashin. I learned from her not only to be respectful of this beautiful art form, but also to enjoy it to the fullest. I remember every time we had a performance, she would always put us in a circle. Those who could drink would give us a little shot of tequila. So we could lose the nerves. I didn't implement that in my company, but it was that sense of like family, like culture, like this is a tradition that she did. And I remember too, one of the biggest lessons she taught me is don't forget that tradition is a living thing. You are gonna put your spin on tradition. What you see people doing reggaeton right now is gonna be on stage in a few days, and now you see it at the Grammys. You know what I mean? Like, there's nothing wrong giving yourself the liberty to create, as long as you're respectful of what you are trying to present, right? Don't do a mockery of anybody. Even if it's gonna be a satire piece, do it because you researched it and it's gonna have a point of view. And us being mentors, I think that by being on stage and being brave enough to bend the norm, that is already giving the community someone that they can reflect on. And that is already happening. Sometimes when we go perform, I mean, people come to us and say, I had never seen that before, and it is so refreshing and so rewarding to see it, and I feel connected. I feel that I mentor my students, and they have a lot of respect for me. I love that. But at the same time, I have a lot of respect for them. The time, their effort, the correct instruction. If they're not doing it well, it is important to be that mentor and say, no, that's not how it's done. Let's do it correct, and let me explain why. And, teach history, teach everything that you can to make a well-rounded artist.
I think I would, yeah, that was beautiful. I think I would say that mentorship is something I really wish I had a lot more of when I was growing up. I feel like one thing that I'm trying to work on and fix also is, that relationship between student and teacher, which I feel like a lot of times, especially in the South Asian realm, is of the dance world, is kind of sometimes can be very toxic in terms of like, you owe so much undying loyalty to your instructor for, till you die. There's like often like this very intense like loyalty that you have to kind of provide, and I feel like that relationship is sometimes very unhealthy. And I think, and if you want to branch out or trying to do your own craft, I feel like sometimes that at least historically in my experience and in a lot of the people I knew growing up in the Bay, I feel like they had similar experiences. And I feel like for me, I feel like now that I'm like in a position where I'm able to mentor or where I have students, I feel like I'm very much like, okay, how can I have a much more abundance mentality? We can all coexist. And I think that is establishing that kind of, hey, you're able to create and do whatever you do, but similarly, like, you know, learn your history, know what you're doing. Don't just like, you know, go out and about and just teach what you think it all is. But if you want to explore, just come from a slightly more informed place. There's always room for grace and learning and all of that. But at the same time, like, you should still come from a much more informed place. That's still ideal. But at the same time, like, you know, maybe you're onto something that all of us are not, you know, that we're not there. And I think allowing for your students and stuff to like surpass you, I think that's like such a big thing. I feel like staying humble enough to be like, hey, you're not, like, you don't know it all, and that's okay. The people you like are mentoring will hopefully rise above and beyond. And I think that's, at least for me, I feel like that's, I think what I'm seeing a lot more of, which is quite awesome. I feel like the younger generation is like so freaking awesome that I'm just like, oh, I wish I was that like 10 years ago. And I'm like, you know, it's beautiful. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely like feeling similar, like definitely not enough mentors for myself, especially with what I'm doing now in my work. But I would say that the mentorship was more like peer-led mentorship with a lot of other Two-Spirit artists that I know and other Indigenous artists, whether they're Two-Spirit or not. Yeah, I think that has been the skill share, the cultural exchange has been it. But then, you know, as I'm leaving my 30s, there's younger and younger dancers that are in my world. And yeah, I feel similar, just like being generous as best I can and giving away what I've gotten, because I would love more competition. I think that's fun, it's challenging. And also too, I think it'd be a waste for all that I've received and been given, and then to not freely give it as well to other people, I think it'd be a waste for me. So yeah, for me it's like peer-led, and then just be generous, give it all away. Why not? You know what I mean? Yeah, I'll go farther.
So I'll add a tiny bit on to just what Amit was saying. I think, yeah, mentorship in the South Asian space is a very tricky thing. And it's a very, yeah, there's a lot there. I was taught that teacher is God from a very young age, and I think with that comes this idea that teacher is you can't question your teacher. You're subservient. You must be devoted. You must bow down to them. You have to touch our practice was you'd touch your teacher's feet at the beginning of every dance class. Like, it was very physical. It's very explicit always. And with that comes kind of like implicitly, I think, a block on any questions. Because if teacher is God, then God is always right, and you're not going around being like, hey, God, like, why aren't there queer people in your company? You can't really do that. And so I think, yeah, a lot of the people that I considered my mentors, I think I've reevaluated that a lot recently, because I don't know if all of that was mentorship or if it was just blind loyalty. But as I grow as an artist and I hope to move forward, I think, similar to what everyone has said, just continuing to be open and to be willing to learn from everyone around me. And I think, similar to Snowflake, what you mentioned, I feel like a lot of the mentorship that I would consider myself to be receiving and have received is from people that I work with. I'm mentored by everyone who I create work with. I'm mentored by everyone who I choreograph with, who I'm in class with, who takes my class even. Because those are people that can teach. Those are people that can teach you so much, and those are the people that are interested in the things that I'm interested in and willing to be in that space and share that space together. Because that wasn't something that I ever got growing up. There wasn't queer South Asian work that I got to be a part of until the last 4 years, genuinely. And yeah, I think I'm very lucky, at least at school, to get to work with Hari Krishnan. If you don't know him, look him up. He's an OG of Indian contemporary dance and of queer Indian dance and art, particularly in the Western world. And he's someone who's been in the queer contemporary Indian dance scene for a really long time. And I met him last year, and I think he's one of the first people from the generation that we are supposed to consider our mentors that has actually been a true mentor to me in terms of letting me actually be myself in his presence and learn from him unabashedly in that way. And so I think, yeah, on the topic of mentorship, it's a search, and a lot of us, I think, as we navigate the whole queerness thing, there aren't necessarily people that come before us, and that comes with being ourselves. But I think we can all hope that in the future, for all of the generations that are to come, there will be more of these mentor figures, more of these queer elders and queer dancers that have come before us. Yeah.
Quick question. I'm really curious to know at Arts West we're trying out this new format per request of artists communities. Really curious about what drew folks, the audience, the audience of this program today. What we're looking for, what they're thinking, want to share. We're looking at these arts dialogue not as the educational sessions with experts speaking to the audience, but really more like intimate circles where we can have conversations about these topics that artists really want to talk about. So really curious on popcorn. Does anybody want to say, what drew you to today's session? I see somebody taking a lot of notes in the front. Oh, yes.
Hi, my name is Miranda. I'm really sad to have missed the first hour of this really beautiful conversation that's happening. My personal background is I come from a classical Chinese dance space that I think was really formative in my perception of arts growing up, and also was equally, I would say, sheltered, or a lot of the things that I found discussed in this panel really resonated with me, also as a queer person who didn't necessarily see anything outside of the binary within a classical space. So I was just really interested to hear and see other people's experiences, how they might embody that in their workshops, or even in just talking about their work. And yeah, totally no expectations whatsoever. I'm just happy to be here. So, thank you.
Anyone else? Yes. I see you taking lots and lots and lots of notes throughout the conversation.
Yeah, my name is Renuka. Like I mentioned, I come from I learned Bharatanatyam for almost 13 years and left dance for quite a few years, and I'm now just getting back to it with Dania Dance and Drum. And I'm interested in exploring choreography for myself as a queer South Asian person. And so a lot of what I came here for was really understanding what's happening in the queer dance space, and trying to think about how my choreography can hold all of the different parts of who I am and what I want to see.
Does anybody else want to share what brought them here today?
Hi, thank you for your conversation. It was really interesting. My name is Ina Dallas, and I work for the San Francisco Unified School District. I oversee the performing arts in our arts department for the public schools in San Francisco. And something that's often on my mind and heart is creating a safe space for LGBTQ plus community for our babies in public schools. And I just wanted to come in and listen to you all's expertise and experience and take some notes to just ignite thoughts on professional development for teachers and just some things to look for when I'm in classrooms, especially at the elementary level. Thank you.
Maybe last comment, if any audience member wants to share.
Hi, my name is Marcus. I'm studying in art school right now. I'm at CCA, and I'm also minoring in critical ethnic studies. And I thought that this would be a really wonderful opportunity to not only explore that intersection of my identity as a Mexican and Japanese person, but also as a queer person, and navigating that kind of space. And I don't really know anything about dance, so I also wanted to just explore what that would be like.
Thank you all so much, and thank you to all of you for being here. We so appreciate it, and we're really grateful that you all took the time to come and be in conversation with us and listen and chime in yourselves. Really appreciate it. Before we wrap, if you are interested in experiencing the beautiful, expansive spaces that these artists create in their work, or at least that Amit creates in his work, he will be teaching a short, hour-long dance workshop open to all levels of experience right immediately after this panel. So do stick around if you're interested and want to move a little bit. We've been sitting for a little while. But other than that, thank you so much to all of you beautiful panelists. It's been an honor to get to talk with all of you, and thank you to Anne for having me. And to all of you for being here, for holding space, for sharing the space, and for engaging with us today. We appreciate it so much, and we hope, one, to see you at more of these conversations and events in the future, and we hope that these conversations lead to more conversations, and that these dialogues continue to happen in our communities, because that's really how these spaces will become normal and abundant for us all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, wonderful cultural artist speakers. And also, this is the weekend 1 of the World Arts West Dance Festival. Weekend 2, come back next weekend. Actually, this afternoon at 3 o'clock, we have another panel called Dance as Resistance. We're going to be talking about how many cultural artists actually practice their artistic practices and cultural traditions are actually rooted in combating colonialism. So this is a culturally specific and universal topic in our community. So come back at 3 o'clock for that panel, and also after that there's going to be a beginner level Haitian workshop. Next weekend we're going to have 2 more panels in this space, Dance Mission. And weekend 3, September 8th, come to the Presidio for the afternoon of wonderful performances, including Ensemble Colibri. You'll see some fun performances of what kind of Arturo talked about, including Ishami Dance Company. Yes. And we want to hear from you. How did you enjoy the program? Suggestions for improvement, what you'd like to see next year in our festival. Go to our info table, talk to our staff. Also, our entire festival is free to the community. It's only possible with the generous donations of our individual donors. So please go to your lobby, buy a wonderful t-shirt, yes, and make a donation at a level of your comfort, if you like. And also come and talk to our staff about your program feedback. So thank you so much. This is just the beginning. We're going to continue our revolutionary work later today, later this month, and forever to come. Thank you so much for coming, everybody.